Alright.
We're all looking at it.
Okay. Thanks so much for coming, everybody. Today is May 21st, and it is 12:35. We'll start with roll call on this one.
Cliff is here, he's here.
Ron Smith here.
Yeah, I got it.
And I'm here as well. We'll start with our public comment from Laura Cruz.
So for the public comment, they're attached in the back, it was submitted.
Oh, she's not here?
No.
Oh, gotcha, okay. Has everybody had a chance to review the two public comment documents?
Yes.
We'll move on to adoption of meeting minutes. Has everyone had a chance to look them over?
Motion to approve.
Second, all in favor? Aye. All opposed? Motion passes. Approval of absences, Jarvis and Monica. Monica, would you like to speak to that?
Yes, my mom had surgery that day.
Motion to approve. Do I hear a second? All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion passes. Okay. Moving on, monthly shelter report.
Yes, good afternoon, everyone. So wanted to give you a couple updates over at ACS. First off, facility-wise, you know that we have our ASPCA grant that was awarded to us, and we had some kennel partitions. That section of that project is complete, so that is done. We're very excited, we're utilizing all that now. The HVAC replacement for the cat building is almost complete. We have about 2 to 3 weeks more for them to be done with all the ductwork and finalizing all of that unit. So we're very excited to have that moved back up and running very soon. The cremation unit is scheduled for repairs June the 9th. We already called verified, they will be flying our technician out, he will be here on that day. We've begun utilizing Corpus Christi Pet Memorial Center for our cremation services and have gone one time, which was yesterday. And we will use them whenever or if our cremation unit does go down again. That will be our new protocol. The existing plumbing, if you did see a plumbing truck outside, we are getting all of that looked at, flushed out, cleaned. That way it can help with our plumbing backup issues that we have in all of our kennel buildings. So hopefully with this flushing and cleaning, it'll help and our system will run correctly. Staffing, on a good note, animal care officer training started this Monday. We have 4 new candidates that are in there. In classroom training will last about 2 weeks, and then there'll be an additional 4 to 6 weeks with them working in the field, learning on the job training out with experienced officers. And then they'll come back in the facility and work into the different divisions. They'll work with clinic, live release, so they know exactly how this facility runs, okay, and what everyone does. The veterinarian position is posted on different sites, including American Veterinary Medical Association Career Center, Association of Shelter Veterinarians, Texas A&M University Center for Veterinary Medicine and Biomedical Science. We're very excited about that one. And Humane World for Animals, as well as our city site. And those are posted for 30, 60, and 90 days. And so we're gonna keep extending those until we have someone in place, okay? Our other positions we have currently posted is an Animal Care Services Supervisor, which closes June the 3rd. Animal Care Investigator, which also closes June the 3rd. And then we had an Animal Care Officer Lead, which closes today. So we're very hopeful on getting applications for those positions. And the last section, our budget. We have begun our budget process. We're looking at all areas of ACS that need funding allocations. We are, facilities, staffing, everything. We're working closely with City Gates and looking at all the recommendations, and we're going off of our 5-year implementation plan as well. Yes, ma'am.
So Kathleen, remind me, we have how many new people who are gonna go through training? These are officers.
officers, there's 4 that started.
And they're gonna be in the field.
As of right now, they're in classroom for 2 weeks. They learn their basics, and then they go out into the field. Yes, ma'am.
And so that'll make it, if we already have 9, that'll make it 13.
Yes, but they do not know all of the ropes. They are not by themselves, so they will be paired up with another officer.
So, in 8 weeks, will that be 8 weeks?
Yes.
Then we'll have 13 officers
Yes.
in the field,
Yes, cross our fingers, everyone.
Independently in the field.
Independently.
independently. in the
Yes.
field. That's what I want. Thank you so
Yes,
much.
ma'am.
Good news.
Yes, very.
Any other questions? Thank you so much. That was great updates. Do you wanna go over the numbers for last month?
Yes, absolutely. So if you guys wanna take a look, I incorporated the year-to-year comparison for us for this one, and then next month is where we'll do the quarterly comparison. The light blue sections are for 2024, and the dark blue sections are for 2025. We have seen a decrease in intakes and a decrease in placement, and so those things are of course tied. The kennel space opening up is what makes space for the animals to go out. However, we did see an increase in our overall live release rate from last year to this year for dogs and cats specifically. On your next page, we have our, just the breakdown of the intakes and the outcomes by type in a slide, or I'm sorry, in a pie chart, if you guys wanted to, for the visual aspects of it. As you can see, the bulk of our animals are going to go to rescue, reclaimed owners, or adopted. And for our cats, they are primarily through adoption as for our placement. Intake is going to be strays on both dogs and cats. The next page has our non-canine and feline intakes and outcomes, and that's gonna be like our ducks and our chickens and our wildlife that we get. We get a lot of injured birds and possums. And so those animals kind of fall into here. With their intake, we impound all of those as considered stray. That may change as we finish, or as we continue working on our intake types and refining our healing systems, but currently they are impounded as strays. And then of course, the majority of those will go to rescue because they're wildlife. And then we have our euthanasia reasons, our euthanasia by reasons. As you can see, we have medical being high. For us, that is in large part due to the increased number of animals that we're finding in the community with distemper. The staff is doing a really good job of identifying these cases as they're coming in. We're getting them seen by the doctors. But because of the fact that we do not have isolation or ability to treat these particular pets, we do have to euthanize. Conversely, when they're arriving, they're usually pretty advanced in the disease as well. So that has seen the increase in our public safety. And so our total euthanasias for last month were 47. And then as you can see, we've got our length of stays, our foster homes, impacting our microchips implanted by us and registered through us. Do you guys have any questions on anything we've gone over so far?
I had a question on the pie chart page.
Sure.
Or more so just a comment. It's most noticeable on the feline outcomes, but some of the colors are really, similar. Just as y'all are working on reports, that's the main one I see on the.
Oh, you know
Yeah,
what that
I know.
is? I'm sorry, I apologize. So what this is this is actually only 1, the rest of these are 0.
Okay,
And so I should have deleted those. And so
Okay,
I
gotcha.
apologize for that. And you can see on this report, yeah.
gotcha.
But so yeah, no, the 94% is only the adoption. It's not the others. That's why the colors are so similar. I apologize.
Miss Cynthia,
Yes, ma'am.
on that pie chart, canine outcomes by type, April
Uh-huh.
2025, that's a high adoption rate, that's 40%.
Yes, of the animals we got placed, 40% of them were adopted, yes,
People took them home.
correct, correct.
And I think we asked you this 100 times. Were they spayed and neutered?
Some of them weren't, so we are looking at, of course, with the difference in vet coverage that we currently
I
have.
know that.
Yeah, so when we have veterinarians here, we're holding up to 4 to 5 days to try to get them sterilized prior to leaving. But when it starts to get a week, like we had 1 week where we could not get sterilization done at all that week, we had to release those unsterilized.
Were they boys or girls?
Both, both, yeah. But we do issue sterilization orders that are followed up with citations. We have officers following up with the citations once a week to make sure that we are checking in on those unsterilized animals and getting them sterilized. And we're currently trying to get a report that will show us the compliance rate in chameleon.
What we're aiming for is no babies.
Right.
1,000%. 1,000%, yes. And so we actually have an agreement. We're in negotiations with a high volume partner to be able to provide services, spay neuter services for us once a week so that we can take the animals there, especially the adopted ones, drop them off, get them sterilized, and then be able to pick them, the new owners will be able to pick them up in the evening. And so we don't have to go back and get them unless we did like a pre-adoption surgery, which we will do. But the bulk of those animals are gonna get to go home from the clinic with the new owners.
And then hopefully that'll create a standard, and then when you pick it up, when they pick it up, their animal after we sterilize, that becomes a new vet for them.
Very nice, thank you.
And that's already
Yes,
discussed.
yes, yeah, no, we're working with Star.
You can measure by recent canine,
Uh-huh.
the rabies test, it was a total of 7 that tested positive.
No, sir, sorry, no, what that means is that the animal was euthanized to be tested for rabies. The reason that we do this is in cases where there is a significant risk, that the person who was bit, right, so maybe they were bit in the face, something like that. We've also had some severe bodily injuries where those animals caused significant damage to the people they bit.
Right.
And those are cases where we will generally euthanize the pet and submit it for rabies testing, rather than housing for the 10 days.
Were you even positive for?
No, sir. No, sir, we have had no positive results.
And then the person who was bitten will get a report saying they had rabies.
Correct. The health department, the state health department reaches out to the victims and notifies them of the results of the test. All right. And now we're into our field services. So for field services, we had 1,000 new calls for service, which is pretty standard for us. We run about 1,000 calls for service a month. And then we had 1,600 calls that we were either resequencing or putting in for follow-up. So we had an initial call and now they need a secondary call, and so that raises that number. Our calls by activity type, we get a whole lot of bite calls. We get a whole lot of injured animal and neglect calls, sick animal calls. Those do take up the majority of our officers' time. And so we are addressing those calls as quickly as possible. And then we get into some of the nuisance calls. Those are like barking. Those are generally barking calls. And then of course, prohibited animals are animals that are prohibited by city ordinance. And then roadside sales, things of that nature. And then these are the citations that were issued in the month of April. The bulk of those is going to be sterilization orders in general. We're really trying to focus with our community on understanding the importance of not only keeping their pets confined, but getting them sterilized and vaccinated. Again, we got our failure to sterilize, sterilization of an adopted animal. Because of the fact that we have not had a lot of, well, we've had animals being unsterilized, but the timeline hasn't elapsed. We don't have citations necessarily for those currently. We have failure to quarantine. That one is a difficulty sometimes. People don't want to quarantine their animals, but if you guys want to go through and take a look, It's usually sterilization, rabies, those are gonna be our big ones as far as what we're issuing citations for, and then failure to provide vet care.
What's the commercial permit? I don't think I've seen that.
So it's any pet shop, grooming service, anything like that. Hey, Jarvis. You wanna,
We're gonna watch the city presentation. Come on up, Jarvis. Start where you wanna. I'm sitting there. Does anyone have any questions? I would just like to say that it looks great. Thanks.
Thank you, city helped design it, Susan is the lady who helped us design it there.
Yeah, it's really good. Thank you for doing that.
Thank you.
Oh, do we know, with that being said, as far as the data quality, where do y'all think we're at on that?
So if you note on the report, there is starting on midpoint of page 3, an asterisk has the disclaimer at the bottom that the data is pulled from unverified previous reports. So for our data quality, our intakes and our outcomes, we know have accurate reporting. The rest, that is actually one of Miguel's primary projects right now, is getting those reports up and running.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, I think we're ready to move on to our presentation.
Good afternoon, Jen, Susan.
Hello. Jan, can you hear? I can hear, and good afternoon, everyone. I needed to unmute my computer. Thanks for giving us the opportunity to come and present with you this afternoon. This is going to be basically the same presentation that was given to City Council at a study session. So if everybody's ready, I will prepare to go through it.
I'm sorry, Jan, 1 second.
Okay.
Miguel, can you minimize the screen?
Just do it.
And are we going to have the PowerPoint on the screen that we can see?
So theoretically, we're going to be sharing it shortly.
Okay, that's what I was hoping for. I know we're still getting some of the bugs out of this system.
So sorry, folks, it's running slow.
There we go.
Okay.
So good afternoon, everyone. Again, thank you for the opportunity to give you this presentation this afternoon. We will be walking through a little bit about the department as well as the Citygate assessment, which started back in October of 2023. Next slide, please. Okay, so these are the objectives for this afternoon's presentation. We're going to review with you the project scope. We'll give you a little bit of background on Citygate. As I mentioned, we'll talk about the Animal Care Services Department. Then we'll go into the key findings and recommendations, our 5-year implementation plan, and then any questions and answers that may come up. Citygate has been in operation for about 35 years at this point, and we call our business model a virtual city hall. And what that means is we do assessments for local governments, both cities and counties throughout North America. And originally, Citygate started off in the areas of public safety, basically fire and police operational assessments, but over the years have gone into many different types of assessments, including animal care and control programs throughout the country. Our consultants, thank you, Miguel, yeah, I'll try to cue you when we're ready to go. Our consultants for this project, this is the team that worked on this project. It included our Citygate president, myself on the second bar there. I was the project manager. Susan Feingold, who is here with us this afternoon, she is also a senior animal services specialist with Citygate, and we had Angela Yates and Andrew Green, who is our financial specialist, also on the team. Next slide. So just a little bit about me. I started in animal welfare back in 1979. I worked in 5 different agencies over the years. My last position was with Santa Barbara County Animal Care Services, and I retired from there after 19 years as the director in 2018. I have worked in both private and public animal welfare agencies, and I'm currently working as a consultant with Citygate as well as with the State Association for California. The next slide is about Susan. Susan was the other primary consultant on the assessment, and she participated in multiple on-site as well as, of course, a lot of extensive work with virtual meetings and that type of thing. She has been director of many public agencies, and for over 15 years has been doing animal services evaluations. She has expertise in statistics. She's very focused on helping improve live release rates. She's got a very good handle on best practices, and she also is very skilled in shelter design. And she has done numerous animal care assessments, both on her own, as well as mini project with City Gate. Next slide. So this is the timeline. As I mentioned, the project started in September of 2023. And the initial contract term was really very short, about 6 months. But we became aware early on that we were going to need to extend the project for a longer timeline. And the current project is scheduled to terminate at the end of this calendar year. It took a number of months to develop the report. As you can see, about in the middle, the longer blue line there. We had multiple site visits. The new director was appointed in May of 2024. We had an additional site visit in May of 2024, and also additional site visit in May of 2025, which was about implementation. Next slide, please. So this was the scope. This was the basic assessment scope that was requested by the city. It was to align the department with best practices, to evaluate the facility, the workflow, the animal flow, and specifically look at efficiency and effectiveness. We were also asked to look at departmental culture. There was extensive staffing analysis, a lot of emphasis on the policies and procedures. We also looked at historical operational data, and we analyzed the marketing and community outreach efforts by the department, and then of course making recommendations for improvements. So this will just be an overview of animal care services. The hours of operation, you're probably quite familiar with this, but open to the public Monday through Saturday, with the office opening at 8 a.m. Adoptions and microchipping occurring from 1 to 5:30 on the open days. Field operations having regular operations 7 days a week with 24-hour on-call services. And kennel operations, of course, 7 days a week, caring for the animals in the shelter. And then this is the timeline of what the animal care department, where it's been housed historically. So it started as a subdivision of the health district, and that was prior to 2012. And then in 2012, it was moved under the police department, which continued until 2021, when it went under the neighborhood services department, which only lasted a couple of years because the neighborhood services department was only in existence for a couple of years. And then in 2023, the city manager determined to make the department its own department, and it was then determined to appoint a director and have it be a standalone department beginning in 2023. And pretty much right behind that was the decision to go forward with an assessment and looking for ways to improve the operations of the department. And this is the historical 6-year history of the budget. As you can see on the very bottom line there, the budget is clearly directly related to the number of FTEs. And the budget has been pretty consistently going up over the past 6 years, with the current year budget for 57 FTEs at 5.09 million annual adopted budget. And the facility, which of course you are at today, the facility includes 3 kennel buildings, a maintenance building, a laundry and storage building, and then the admin building, which is where the multi-purpose room that we're having the meeting today is in the admin building. And then just a little overview of the various department divisions and their role. So this is the org chart, which includes the 57 budgeted FTEs. With the director at the top of the org chart, and now we have an assistant director. We also have a veterinarian. The 57 FTEs cover both the veterinary, the admin, community relations, the programs for field and shelter. At the time that we did this org chart, there were 10 vacancies and 47 filled. I don't know the actual number of today, but I can tell you it's kind of a moving target. A fairly high vacancy rate is not uncommon in animal care services, especially since COVID. The business changed a little bit as a result of COVID, and I think it's resulted in a little bit more turnover in staffing in shelter operations. Next slide. So the customer care staff, there are 4 FTEs that are the front desk, basically the customer-facing staff for the shelter. They handle the phone traffic as well as all the customers coming into the front office. They do adoptions and redemptions. They do sales of licensing. They process the public records request. Obviously, a very busy operation there at the front desk. In field operations, this includes both the investigator staff as well as the animal care officers that do patrol within the division. They're responsible for enforcing city ordinances, responding to calls for service out in the field. They conduct fight investigations, cruelty and neglect investigations, as well as dangerous dog or aggressive animal investigations, and they oversee the rabies control program. Next slide. Kennel operations is currently staffed with 13 FTEs, and they provide the care for the animals 7 days a week. This includes the cleaning, the feeding, sanitizing the cages, providing the animals with enrichment, assisting with adoptions, assisting with lost and found, and implanting of microchips. And then the live release team, there are 4 FTEs as well as 1 contracted consultant in this area. And they're responsible for facilitating adoptions. They assist with the foster home program. They are the collaborators for the rescue partners and the transfers going out. They coordinate the volunteer program. They do behavior assessments as well as providing animal enrichment. And then the veterinary clinic, in addition to the veterinarian, there are 2 veterinary assistants and 1 clinical lead who is a registered vet technician. They provide the medical care for all sheltered animals. They ensure that they're receiving their proper vaccinations, deworming, any core medical care that they might need, as well as the spay-neuter surgeries, and treating any animals that are sick or injured and cared for within the shelter. And now we'll go into the assessment. So the overall assessment provided insights for improvements and alignment with ACS for best practices. There was a lot of investigation of the workplace culture, and we saw pretty much of a need for some really important changes in the culture culture of the on outreach.
You're breaking up,
So you
Jan.
change, kind of take on. Okay, hopefully, how about now?
Yes.
How are you hearing me?
You're perfect.
Okay. Good.
No, you're not.
May we go back to the beginning of culture?
Sure.
Yeah, we'll let her know.
So maybe I'll close some of those windows. See if that gives us a little more bandwidth. Can you try talking again, Jan?
Oh,
We can't hear you. We've lost you.
can you hear me now?
There
What
you
about
are.
now?
Yes. Now we can hear you.
Better?
Yes,
Okay.
ma'am. A board member has requested that you start again with the discussion on culture.
Okay.
That's about where we lost you.
All right, sorry for that. It could be on my end. I kind of live in the boonies. So my connection is sometimes sporadic, but hopefully we'll be able to maintain it. I closed out of a few things, so hopefully, we'll be good. So in addition to, various improvements and recommendations that we made, we did see some areas of the culture that we thought needed improvement. So there are some specific recommendations in regard to that. Citygate also was recommending a focus on education and community outreach. The changes that are recommended are gonna take time, they take commitment. Some of them will take resources, including budget. And based on that, we came up with a multi-year approach, basically a 5-year phased approach for implementation. All of the improvements and recommendations within the report are interconnected. Basically, they're all going to reflect, back on each other. So it's going to be important that there is a cohesive approach as we go and implementate, and focus on implementation. And we do know that implementation will increase the city's live release rate. As far as key findings, and these are basically high-level key findings, additional staffing does require budget allocations. The facility is outdated. It was, we'll go into this a little later, but it was built in 2004 and hasn't had a lot of updates since then. It has insufficient office and kennel space, and those type of improvements also require budget. We are recommending basically a total overhaul of the policies and procedures manual, and that new policies need to be written and added to the policy manual, as well as updating existing policies. Staff training needs to meet industry standards, needs to meet best practices, and needs to be done in order to implement the new policies. And we also saw a lot of improvement needed in the statistical reporting to be sure that it's accurate, credible, and usable. So this is just a pie chart of the SOP, of the recommendations by category. And so you can see the blue section is the SOP and the orange section is operations. So the bulk of the recommendations are in operational areas that are clearly internal and are going to be driven by staff. There are 6 that are related to facility and 27 related to staffing. And those will be things that may require some budget input, but the majority of the recommendations and the point of the pie chart here is to show that most of these changes will be done by actions by staff. next. So we're gonna walk through just an overview of the recommendations. So in a highlighting of the recommendations. For general operations, we recommend the hours open to the public be increased, that the phone calls coming into the shelter go through a phone tree. And that is one recommendation that's already been implemented, so we're happy to report that one is already in place. As I mentioned earlier, SOPs need a total revamp. The statistical reporting needs to be standardized, and that is in progress, but is not quite finalized yet. Animal registration needs to include rabies vaccination, which is required by both your local Corpus Christi ordinance as well as Texas state law. We saw a lot of opportunities for increasing efficiencies, and we had a lot of recommendations in regard to the website, many of which are already in progress or have been implemented. Next slide, please. In shelter operations, we recommended the intake process needed to be streamlined, and that is in progress. Pathway planning, we recommend pathway planning to begin right at intake. And so what this means is when an animal comes in, we look at how is the presentation of the animal, what resources will be needed to give it a quick pathway out or a live outcome. And so starting that pathway planning on intake is a way to increase efficiency and decrease the length of stay for animals in the animal shelter. That feeding procedures should follow the shelter veterinarian guidelines and best practices, and the same with cleaning SOPs, that we're sure we're following best practices there. We wanted to see enrichment provided for all animals, dogs, cats, and miscellaneous animals as well coming into the shelter. That a consistent training process be implemented to ensure that as we update our SOPs, that staff is trained on the new SOPs. And that we endeavor to be sure the 5 freedoms are being provided to our sheltered animals. So the 5 freedoms are listed there, and some of these are reasonably easy to provide, such as the first one, making sure the animals are receiving adequate food and water on a daily basis. Freedom from discomfort, making sure there's a soft bed, making sure there's the animal has a comfortable place to be held. Freedom from pain, injury, and disease. So if animals come into us suffering from any of those, that those are addressed on early on with the animal's stay. Freedom to express normal behavior, and that will include providing them the enrichment, giving them the opportunity to get out of their enclosures on a regular basis, and freedom from fear and distress. So that includes making sure that we employ techniques that minimize the amount of fear that the animals experience in the animal shelter. A shelter can be a terrifying place for animals when they come in, especially initially. It's new, it's loud, they can be in a cage where they've never been housed before. So animals experience a lot of fear coming into an animal shelter. So employing techniques that minimize that and making sure that we do that for every animal in our care. Next slide. So for field operations, our recommendations included making sure we update the procedure manual, and that once it's finalized, it's used for training. That the dispatcher is assigning and tracking field activities on a a daily basis, on an hourly basis in real time. That we develop and utilize some really useful reports for supervisors and managers who are monitoring field operations, making sure that we're in line with our priorities, we're meeting our response time expectations, and we're handling an adequate number of calls. Developing a method to be sure that priority calls are getting handled in a timely manner and getting resolved, and filling the vacancies and training the new staff. And they talked about that earlier, that we have 4 new officers coming in and they're gonna start their training. It is typical that it takes 6 to 8 weeks to fully initiate training for an animal care officer, and that it's basically an ongoing training and reinforcement process for the first 6 months to year of their employment. The department follows that type of a schedule with training of officers. Next slide, please. So in the veterinary program, there were a lot of recommendations, making sure that there are standardized calls, so that for typical situations experienced in the shelter, there's a protocol for staff to follow, ensuring that sick and injured animals are isolated and receiving prompt care, that the daily medical rounds are being conducted so that any new situations arising for medical care are getting addressed timely, increasing the number of in-house spay and neuter surgeries, and making sure that we minimize the release of unaltered animals going out, whether those are adopted or whether those are reclaimed animals. Developing an inventory system for medical supplies, and this was done and has been accomplished. So I believe this one is one we can check off as being completed. Making sure we make good use of our partner resources that have been offered to increase medical care in the shelter. An example being we don't have an X-ray machine at the shelter, but we have partners that have offered that service and at no fee. So we want to make sure that's being utilized. And we also recommended hiring a part-time or contract veterinarian to make sure that there is coverage 7 days a week for veterinary care. In adoptions, we wanted to make sure we have a really good, strong customer focus and friendly adoption process with our potential adopters, that there are designated adoption counselors, and that they're ready to work with potential adoptions all the way from the beginning to finalization, including even the processing the adoption in the database, expansion of adoption policies, and training volunteers to assist in this area, that there is a designated adoption counseling area near the kennels, and that has been established within the admin area in the admin building, and that pre-payment for animals still on their stray hold be discontinued. Next slide is about the foster program. There's a lot of opportunity for expanding the foster program, and that would definitely be a best practice we would love to see the Corpus Christi Animal Care Services making better utilization of. So there should be a designated foster coordinator, a key point person that is developing new foster homes, training new foster families, making sure foster parents have the resources that they need, and that we want to see the policies updated for current implementation of expansion of the foster program. slide. And with social media and the website and marketing, and as I mentioned, the website has been revamped and is really being developed very well. We did want to see more posts of adoptable animals with really good quality photos and very nice descriptions, marketing friendly descriptions, accurate, but making sure that they're showing the animal in the best light. Updating the website so that it goes directly to animals at the shelter, not all the animals that are in the various zip codes, but may not be in the current shelter, in our current shelter. Making sure the community relations specialist is familiar with the adoptable animals and can respond to any questions or comments that are coming up through social media, and posting of the statistics as considered a best practice in shelters currently, with monthly statistics on the website and not posting the daily update to statistics on Facebook. Next slide. In the area of euthanasia, this is always an area that we look at and review in our assessments. Making sure that the policy is clear and that there is a clear process for decision making. Discontinuing length of stay as a reason and holding animals as long as space allows, and recording the reason as space if they are euthanized due to lack of space. Best practices, making sure that we get the intake vaccines and prompt veterinary care that will help decrease the length of stay, that will decrease the amount of illness in the shelter. Making sure best practices on cleaning and disinfection are practiced so that illness is minimized. Making sure the controlled drug logs are reconciled on the schedule as required by law, and making sure a veterinarian authorizes emergency medical euthanasias. Next slide. Proactive programs. So with proactive programs, Citygate really recommends that we back burner most of the proactive programs until the operations are more with best practices and the new SOPs have been implemented. So while proactive programs are valuable, with the current infrastructure, we don't think that CCACS is able to support most of those programs at the current time. So some recommendations were, do your free microchipping, just maybe schedule a couple hours in the afternoon after cleaning has been done, and at hours when there is staff available, not on a drop-in basis where staff has to basically stop what they're doing to go out and implement a microchip. And development of a targeted free spay-neuter program for the public that's done within a partnership with a nonprofit to reduce overpopulation in the community, but not facilitated through the shelter. As right now, there's a challenge just doing spay neuters for shelter animals. So there's a section in the report on proactive programs, which covers most of these recommendations. Next slide. So at the end, so Citygate actually recommended 170 recommendations in the report. They are very detailed. They go into a lot of minutia, and so many of them, and there's some overlap in them. But the bottom line is that we felt with that number of recommendations, we should, in making a phased implementation schedule that we prioritize these. So at the end of the recommendations, there are four basically high priorities. Hiring an experienced assistant director of operations was one, and I'm happy to report that was achieved back in July of last year. An experienced assistant director was hired. Um, Reviewing the mission and goals and renewing the departmental commitment to serving animal welfare needs. That's definitely in progress. Establishing veterinary performance measures to increase the standard of care and decrease the length of stay, also in progress. And a complete revision of the SOPs, also in progress. So we did want to highlight additional staffing needs, and the reason for this slide is that everything that's in red means that these new positions are going to relate to needs for budget allocations through city council. So this would be handled, over the course of a few years implementation with 15 recommended. We would not recommend that those all be implemented at once. So there is some phasing included in our recommendations, but this is a summary of the staffing needs for 15 new staffing positions. Next slide. And so this is a recommendation for reclassifications. We did recommend that all of the live release positions actually become designated positions with specialization in the various areas of volunteer coordination, adoption counseling, and a rescue and foster coordinator. Next slide. And so the facility recommendations also are going to take budget allocations. We do recommend an additional dog kennel building, which would increase the capacity of the number of dog kennels somewhere between 20 to 36 new dog kennels, making sure that the new facility would include climate control. The current dog kennels do not have air conditioning. That an addition of a minimum of 18 cat cages, which could be done in a trailer on a temporary basis, but would hopefully be built into a permanent cattery later on, and additional isolation facilities for cats are also recommended. Next slide. So these are the facility enhancements that are contained within the report. Air conditioning in the existing kennel buildings. Right now, there are only fans, which will not provide the needed temperature for creature comfort. That there is a dedicated adoption counseling area, and as I mentioned, that's been completed. That the meet and greet areas be expanded, including protection from the elements during inclement weather, including rain and protection from the sun. That there be a separate public animal turn-in area. That is a little harder to accomplish with the current physical plan, but I know it's being looked at under consideration. That the dispatch area be moved out of the front office and into the area where the animal control officers are housed, and so that there would be a dedicated dispatch office, that there would be a dedicated volunteer coordinator office, and also that the current feral cat room be remodeled. demonstrate, current conditions. You can see the 3 fans in the interior of the kennel. But the fans, when it's a very hot day, do not bring the, temperature down as recommended as a best practice. There has been some augmentation of the meet and greet areas. These are some agility course equipment, which would add some opportunity for animals to have enrichment, dogs for enrichment in the meet and greet areas, and some roofing and some additional sidewalks and things are also being used for expansion of meet and greet areas. Next slide. And so then, as I mentioned, we came up with a 5-year implementation plan with basically every one of the 170 recommendations mapped out into the plan. Next slide. So this is an overview of where we currently stand on the implementation timeline. At least 65 of the recommendations we expect to complete during the current fiscal year. So that would be by the end of September of this year. And then a minimum of 26, and I would predict most likely more that would be completed in fiscal year 2026, and the remaining of the 79 implemented over the 3-year period. And again, those would be a lot of the ones that are going to take some financial and budget assistance to make sure they get accomplished. Slide. So of the 170, there are actually only 28 that require city council consideration and budget allocation. And those are 22 of the staffing related recommendations and 6 related to facility. So in closing, we are continuing to work with animal care services through at least the current calendar year. Progress is definitely being made. We're really very focused right now on the policy and procedure manual, and it will be complete for sure by the end of the current fiscal year. As far as implementation, that takes a little longer. It requires change. It requires process changes, and it requires a lot of training of staff. Citygate has really been impressed with the city's commitment to improving animal care services. As I mentioned at the beginning of the presentation, the assessment is a moment in time, and at this point, it's quite a while back. Our initial observation periods were done in December of 2023 and May of 2024. So that has been quite a while back, and a lot of changes have occurred since then. And so we are happy to say that the report, we think, is a roadmap for the future and a comprehensive evaluation with a lot of recommendations going forward. Happy to have any questions, and Susan was able to join us today. She's also, as I mentioned earlier, been one of the primary consultants working on the project and a primary author of the report. And so we're both here to answer any questions that you might have.
Don't answer that once.
I've got a question on the cutback of the proactive services. The proactive services, I believe, especially the, microchip, is a very healthy step forward, towards the environment for, animal care in Corpus Christi. Would maybe a smaller effort, a scaled back version of that be your recommendation instead of just dropping it completely?
We didn't recommend that you drop it at all. We,
Okay.
we want you to continue it. It's very, very important to, improve the live release rate through reclaims. We just recommended that you do it more efficiently. Right now, anyone can come in any time of the day to get a free microchip implanted, which interferes with staff time. So for efficiency time, we recommended you do what most shelters do, and that is set up certain hours of the day they can come in. Some shelters do it by appointment only and have like an online appointment. So that would be a good idea too, but the only recommendation we have as far as that goes is just make sure it's during a set period of time when there's staff available and you're not taking them away from their important duties when they're short staffed.
Okay, I thought that was one
Continue
through,
to do it on a daily basis.
I thought that was 1:30 through 5, Monday through Thursday, or Monday through Friday. 1 o'clock through 5 o'clock, Monday through Friday. Currently,
Monday through Saturday.
or Monday through Saturday. So scale that back even more, or
No.
just have them set up an appointment instead?
No.
I misunderstood that completely then.
I think maybe because during their observation, and correct me if I'm wrong, Jan, Susan, but, if someone came in at like 10 a.m.
Uh-huh.
and said I needed a microchip, they were getting their microchip.
Oh, okay, I didn't know that. I thought they were
Yes,
sticking
and
to the.
even though we had set hours from 1 to
We're not gonna
5:30.
turn anyone away.
Right. So that's what they're saying, is if, stay with the 1 to 5:30.
Okay,
We're just thrilled that they want a microchip around.
Yes.
I have a couple of questions. First, I was wondering, when you listed out the recommendations by type, what do you define the difference between the SOPs versus the operations? What's the distinction there?
If I'm understanding the question correctly, I think the SOPs, the standard operating procedures, guide your operations. So once we have revamped those, we've set up, clear guidelines on, how you enter the data, how we pull the statistics, things like that. Then we utilize those SOPs as training tools to get everybody moving in the same direction, to get everybody following the same procedures. Set up best practices for how to clean a kennel, and what the feeding schedule should be for animals, and then we're just validating, verifying through operations that everyone is following those best practices. Does that answer the question?
Yeah, that's enough. And then I was wondering about, as far as marketing goes, I know communications had come, when they took over the social media for animal care services. Do you still recommend that stays with communications, or do you recommend, I know a lot of shelters have more on-site, the people that are on the ground, kind of, this is what's happening now. What is y'all's opinion of that?
Yeah, the marketing piece should be handled by someone at the shelter who gets to know the animals directly. So when we were first on site, when I was first on site, there were the people who were making the posts were on site and doing the posts. Then the posts just weren't good. They weren't allowed to be good at that point. But it's very important that all the animal posts be done by someone who directly interacts with the animal and gets to know them.
A follow-up to that is, I know there's been discussion in the past about the communicating to the public which animals are at risk of euthanasia. I know that could go a variety of ways, but what's your recommendation on communicating those things to the public?
We didn't include that in the report, but my personal opinion is you do everything in your power to get these animals out alive. And so if they're gonna be not alive, you need to do everything. So you do need to post about when they're in danger of being euthanized.
Thanks.
If it's an adoptable animal, not for
Right.
aggressive animals or anything like that.
My last question on your staffing, the total cost for the city, I noticed it includes their salary and benefits. It's okay if you don't have the answer to this, but do you know about roughly what percent of that is for benefits?
No, I don't think I get that from our HR.
No, okay,
Yeah.
that's,
30%?
okay.
Okay.
I think about 30% of the benefit factor is about 30%. of
That's,
salary.
yeah, just roughly is what I was
that's
just
our
curious about.
multiplier,
Okay.
comes up to about 30%. That's for retirement, including the state, management, social security, healthcare
Health, yeah.
benefits, yeah.
I was just curious about how
No,
much
that's good,
that
yeah, it's
was.
about 30%.
Okay,
Yeah.
thanks. That's all I had. Anybody else have questions? Go ahead.
Susan, you had a bullet that said registration must include rabies vaccination. I'm not familiar with that. What registration, and we don't vaccinate here for rabies.
Well, we do.
We do,
We don't vaccinate for the public, but we do vaccinate the animals in the facility for rabies.
okay.
I just wanted to just make that distinction.
Okay, I thought
Yeah.
like we don't spay when they're adopted, we don't vaccinate for rabies.
So no, we do, so we do spay and neuter when they're adopted. Like I said, right now with the situations with the veterinarians, we do have some gaps in coverage for sure.
Right.
But it is covered as part of their adoption fee, as is the rabies vaccine. And for the rabies to be administered, we just have a vet on site.
Susan, one more. You
I
said,
think, let me also add something onto that. In order to license your pet, right now, all you have to do is microchip it, and then you come in and you get it registered or licensed in the shelter. But what the law says is you can't license it unless it also has a rabies vaccination. So that's our recommendation, is that the staff vaccination, or they can't license it. It's a twofold thing.
You guys froze for just a little bit. Did you understand what she was saying?
yes,
Okay.
Okay, and what was the next question? I'm sorry.
I have a quick follow-up to that, and I don't know if it's better to you or them, but, what I'm hearing her say right now is we're talking about animals that are coming in with their microchip and they're trying to get their registration specifically, not coming in just for the microchip. So is there any animals that leave the building through the shelter care that are not getting a rabies? Okay.
and why is that?
Because again, you have to have a veterinarian on site to administer the rabies vaccine. And
We
so,
don't have one yet.
well, we do, but sometimes, so there's a couple of areas. One, animals that are too young for rabies vaccines
That's right.
will absolutely live without rabies vaccinations.
That's right.
Animals that are here, but come in and leave prior to a veterinarian being on site so that we can administer the rabies vaccines. So those are not a large number, but they do occur. And then animals that are too sick for rabies for whatever reason. So they also have to be healthy enough to receive the vaccine.
Do they get something similar, like the sterilization orders to get the rabies
what they-
vaccination?
Yes, what they get is a notice of violation, unless they're too young. So if they're too young, they're not breaking the law, so we're not going to issue a notice of violation. But if they're old enough, then we say, hey, this animal is legally required to be vaccinated for rabies. It's not a citation specifically, unless the animal is owned and it's being reclaimed. But if it is leaving us through adoption, those are the ones that we're gonna say, hey, you need to get a rabies vaccine for this guy.
Susan, I have one more question. So you had a bullet, number 3, field operations. And it said you develop and utilize reports to track field activities and the response time of the officers. What response time are we talking about?
Jan, do you want to answer it or do you want me to answer it?
I'll take a quick stab at it. So the response time is basically from the time that the officer is assigned to go to the call. So you'll get the call, you'll put it into your dispatch queue. Then it's determined, are we assigning this to an officer now? Is it a priority item? Does it need to be handled today? This type of question. Once it's assigned to the officer, the response time is from the time it's assigned to the officer, how long does it take them to actually get there?
So let's say he gets it at, or she gets it at 8:30 in the morning. We want him or her, let's go answer that call. Is that what we're saying?
In the priority that it's designated. Every priority has a different response time amount that you, like high priority calls, you want them there within an hour. Other calls that are lower priority has longer times. And if I may say, Jan, you gave one way to measure response time, but statistically, most shelters measure it a little bit different. They measure it from the time the phone call comes in until the officer gets to the scene. So it's the true response time from the call coming in and it gets put in the system immediately until it's responded to, not when it's dispatched. But Chameleon can do any kind of reports, including the kind that Jan talked about. But usually it's from the, it's an actual response time. If you call into the shelter and you want something done, it's from the time you call until that thing is actually done.
Well, if we have 1,000 calls a month, so the person, and I can ask, the directors, about, yes, if it's, a dog that bit somebody, obviously we want them now to go out, right? I'll ask the rest of my questions, but thank you so much.
Any other questions? Are we ending the call, or?
Yeah, if that's the, from the board, then we'll end the presentation.
Okay.
Jan, Susan, thank
Thank
you guys
you.
so much for coming today, being available. We really appreciate you.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank
guys.
you.
Have a good one.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Thank you for
I
that.
know.
I have one question, but we can do it after the meeting, because we've been here a long time.
Okay, let's quickly go through new business, updates on statistics, trends, overall outcomes on the disposition of animal cruelty cases.
I brought that up, I was just wondering if there was any way to get a report on anything that's going down through your county, the municipal court, and statistics on how cases were disposed of, and what was the final outcome of that.
Yes, so, with those, we're still trying to work with municipal courts to get that information
Right.
provided. Again, like, there's two separate sections, right? There's the citations we issue, then there's the criminal acts that we prosecute, and so trying to find the way to get that information reliably, municipal courts is also overwhelmed, and so, yeah, we're still working on it. We're setting up a meeting with the new director of the municipal court system, to try to see how we can work together to get that information for you.
Okay, great.
Next is public service announcements for animal care services.
I got that one contact to, Matilda, I'm working on some more, and I will provide those as soon as I can come up with more for you.
And then
They're
also,
free of charge.
yeah, and so then I'm currently writing a script, and so we get approved with communication, and then we can continue.
Oh, that'd be great. Also, I'd like to make an addendum to that. I've been trying to find out what the total ethnic makeup is of Corpus Christi. So, yeah, English, Spanish, that takes precedence, but I'm also noticing a large, Southeast Asian population. So those could be translated into either Tagalog or Vietnamese. I think that would also hit that segment of the population that really cares about their animals, but, don't necessarily communicate with English as their first language. So we can look into something like that for some of the other segments of the population. I don't know how hard that would be to do, or what would involve, but I'd like to see that pursued.
We can do that.
So possible.
Definitely Spanish. I'd love to see more
Yeah, yeah,
Spanish
we'll
resources.
look into it, cause the majority is, it's Hispanic, and then white, and then from there, then it's kind of other.
Yeah,
So the,
I think it might be Vietnamese and Filipino and Vietnamese are the next two segments of the population that can be targeted for that.
yeah, less than, look at it and see then if that population too is in a kind of a segmented area.
So,
And we can see if that comes out to, yes, sir.
thank you.
Yes, yes.
Updates on the House bill.
Yes. So currently, the city has responded as far as like the thoughts or feelings on 4 bills that have come forward. The first one is HB 4819. This bill currently requires shelters to collect a $75 deposit from any individual who leaves the facility with an intact animal. Once the animal is sterilized, they are to notify the shelter, and then the shelter has to refund the $75. So what this falls under is a situation where shelters, nonprofit and municipal, would be required to collect and hold or to process refunds of this money with no support from the state for the expense of processing these refunds. Any unprocessed refunds would then be required to be given to the state for their spay-neuter grant program, which is very difficult to get grants from that spay-neuter program. They currently have a great deal of funds. And so for the city itself put forth a statement that this would be detrimental to shelters, both nonprofit and ourselves. And the bill itself went to committee and has been pending there for about a month. So that will probably die. HB 4775, which would allow for the filing of warrants by animal care officers or cruelty investigators or peace officers in adjoining counties or municipalities. The purpose of this bill was to give smaller communities, counties who have less resources, the ability to go and file for a warrant in an adjoining municipality. It is not something that directly impacts Corpus Christi as far as our facility, and then whether or not we as a city allow other municipalities to come in and file those warrants, those would be the court systems. So we were neutral on that, and that has actually been placed on the general calendar, so it will be put before the House for voting before it proceeds to the Senate. HB 4777 would nullify any protections that shelters have on legal statutes pertaining to animals that come in that may have been owned. So, for example, the city of Corpus currently could take in an animal, we hold it for the legally required stray hold time. At that time, once it's exhausted, if no owner comes forward, ownership of the animal is transferred to the city of Corpus Christi. That's what allows us to get it to rescues. That's what allows us to adopt it out. That's what allows us to euthanize animals who are in critical condition or are not able to be placed or are aggressive. If this bill were to go forward, it would nullify that transfer of ownership, meaning that an owner could come forward at any time after we have impounded the animal and sue the city if we dispositioned their animal in a way that is euthanasia. So if we euthanize an animal or their animal got sick or was harmed as a result of its impoundment, meaning it was exposed to communicable diseases and maybe it caught a respiratory infection or it caught distemper because it was never vaccinated prior to coming here, the shelter would be liable. And so this would greatly hurt our ability to manage population of animals coming in and to place them, because we can no longer trust that if I give this animal to another organization and that organization adopts that animal out, that we're not all going to be sued because they no longer have the pet. So we opposed that bill, and it has been left pending in committee since April 25th, so hopefully that is where it will stay.
Yeah, we'll die.
And then HB 349 is the bill pertaining to removal of animals from hot vehicles. They were requesting that no civil penalties be in place for residents who would break into vehicles to remove animals. That is not that's not given to people for people. So there is risk with that, property damage, those types of things. So it is currently the distinction of the city that we would remain with police officers and peace officers being the liaison in these types of cases.
477, the bad bill, we call it.
Yes, the nullifying the transfer of ownership.
And it's not on the calendar yet.
No, it's in committee, so a lot of times you're gonna have bills put forth that will then go to committee and they'll never be heard.
Okay.
Or they'll be read in committee and they'll just sit there until the House session expires and nothing's ever done with them.
Anything on the, telemedicine, veterinary telemedicine?
So the veterinary telemedicine one has not been presented, and so they're still thinking about it. I don't know if it's gonna get a lot of traction in Texas. Texas is a really strict state on veterinary practices. And I've heard through the grapevine that the veterinarians are not comfortable with it, so I'm not sure.
Thanks.
And that's all I got.
Okay, December outbreaks.
There is distemper in our community.
We don't have an outbreak here on the facility.
Yes.
I'm sorry, we do not have an outbreak at our facility.
So what we have seen, we've had 2 cases of distemper, that the animals were in our care, long enough to have either come in with it or to have contracted it here. So we've run 2 down. The significant majority of distemper that we're seeing is from animals coming in from the community and they're presenting with symptoms when they arrive. We do have isolation. We established an isolation building for our respiratory disease. It is the currently air-conditioned building that we are moving our animals that have respiratory illness into that building to limit their cross-contamination with the general population. And so that's going to help control some of the spread of illness. But unfortunately, we will continue to see distemper, and the name of our game now is to manage it because we're not going to be able to eradicate it.
Is that coming in particular neighborhoods or parts of town?
So it's pretty much citywide.
It's all over now.
Yeah, I mean, there's of course the areas with high density of stray animals have more incidences because there's just a denser population of stray animals there. But there's no one particular neighborhood. Like when it first arrived and we noticed it in the Molina neighborhood, it was already within 2 weeks it spread beyond Molina. And for it to have come out of the Molina neighborhood, we had hoped it was all at one house, but it wasn't. We found them throughout that neighborhood. So it had already spread. It had already taken root by the time, as a community, we were able to identify it was there.
When you quarantine them, they're not gonna get any better.
Well, so we do treat, if they have distemper, right? If we identify that this is distemper, we do not treat, right? But your common respiratory illnesses that you see in shelters happen all the time, and some of them you can't vaccinate against, but they're not fatal. And so we do provide treatment, which is antibiotics,
Right.
stuff to help with medication, like fevers, like pain, upset stomachs, those types of things. And so we are providing medication to the pets. If the disease presents itself to be distemper, that's when we were not treating it.
Right.
But our general respiratory disease, which you can't always tell the difference off the cuff, right? So you can't, they present the same. A dog with distemper is gonna look like a dog with respiratory disease. But you can't euthanize every dog that gets a cold in a shelter. That's just inappropriate in the extreme. And so we monitor them, but that's why we isolate them.
Has there been any discussion, I know in the presentation, they talked about doing a little bit less proactive while you're working here. But has there been any discussion about partnering with anybody to, either communicate the issue with the public or do vaccine clinics and things like that?
So, there is a grant currently out. I reached out, to a couple of partners, just trying to get a feel for the temperature on being willing to, if we applied for the grant, administer the vaccines or distemper parvo vaccines to the community. I'm still in the process of talking to people, so I haven't talked to everybody yet. But just to see how people would receive it if they have the bandwidth, right? Because you gotta have the doctor, you gotta have the staff, and we don't, but we absolutely could write the grant and we could manage the grant if someone could do the groundwork. So
We're also researching other states, other cities on what they do, who they partner with, how they partner. And so we're also looking into that as well.
Out of curiosity, is it the Peccola vaccines? Okay, just curious.
And then as far as like, we are still, of course, we're going into the schools, providing education in the schools. We are working, Matilda is working on with Citygate, a very detailed and proactive, community education campaign. And we are also looking at, we've got our heat awareness campaign, she has that schedule done, and then the distemper awareness campaign is almost finished.
Anything else on December? Okay, subjective information. You did give us subjective report. I don't know that we need to talk about it anymore. I did wanna say, maybe on some of the recommendations that y'all are currently working on, those would be good to hear about as well, if you could include those. But what you had today was great. Thank you so much.
It's all about expanding everything in the room, so gotcha.
Absolutely.
Ms. Chapa, very, very productive and very uplifting report.
Does anyone have any future agenda items they would like to add currently?
I'll send those in through email later, I'm working on the wording and verbiage.
All right,
This is later.
motion to adjourn.
Before you,
Oh, yeah.
this will be my last meeting, I'm trimming out, so I just wanna say that it's been a pleasure working with everybody, and I hope y'all continue the great work.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jarvis. Thank you, Jarvis.
And then, sorry, before we conclude, just wanted to, the city manager came to the meeting, so just, want to get a floor in, just to make some comments.
Thank you. I'm gonna start making a point to come to these board meetings as part of our mobile of animal care. That was a very elaborate report that Jan presented. It takes time, we get patience listening to it. But we did ask for it. I asked for this report. We have done a lot in the last 6 years in the city. And I worked on what the council and community's main priorities were over these past 6 years. And they were initially streets, roads, neighborhood street repair, public safety, development services, the airport, the health department. And so over these years, we've now have had time to focus on this. And so we're committed to getting this department right once and for all. It's an important part of our community, any community, having a good animal care operation. We have the blueprint, which is the report that Jan went over, so we know exactly how to do it. We're buying Jan's consultant services through the rest of this year. So as we implement, Jan's gonna help us implement, it's gonna tell us we're doing it right, doing it wrong. She'll help us on the standard operating procedures, because a lot of these are already written in some other city somewhere, so we don't have to recreate the wheel. But we do modify them slightly here for Corpus Christi, and so she'll help us with that. One thing I did want to say, primarily speaking, is that the next step is the 10th of June at City Council. That's where we're going with a $3 million recommendation to implement some of these recommendations. It's one-time monies, meaning it's not a recurring revenue source, and so when you have one-time monies, you generally spend them on capital on one-time things, whether it's a computer, a table, or fixing a building. But we're gonna do two things. We're gonna recommend, I think about $2+ million for capital improvements, like air conditioning in the 3 buildings where the dogs are. And as far as we can take this $2 million and other high priority areas, we already have a consultant engineering firm who's been here once and will give us price estimates this Friday. But we're gonna do a few of the staff recommendations as well, even though it's one-time monies. What we're gonna recommend is we have a 2-year funding allocation. And so it's all the reclassifications that were there, and 2 positions, I think, is our plan, the dispatcher and the supervisor.
3, yes, dispatch supervisor and the community outreach manager.
Community outreach manager, so 3 positions and the reclassifications on the live release. But what we'll do is we'll have enough money for the 1 year, and then we'll hold some of this one-time money as a 2-year reserve. We do have an issue in our city, generally in our budget coming up, we're gonna have to reduce probably over $10 million in operational expenses to meet the revenues that come in. But I wanna do this recurring program here by saving that money for the second year. I think we'll be okay. I think by year 3, we'll be better, hopefully financially. If not, we'll have 2 years to figure out how to continue to fund these staff positions that are recommended. So the budget amendment that's going to City Council in June 10 will be effective probably after a second read, I would imagine, so take 2 meetings. But we can begin to implement those initiatives immediately. We're already beginning with a consultant on the facility improvements. The biggest priority, I think, of us and of the council and the community is air conditioning for the dog kennels. But the staffing is important too, and we'll begin to address some of that with this one-time monies. One other thing is that as you begin to hear more on the budget coming up for our fiscal year that begins October 1, we are gonna have to reduce services by anywhere from 10 to maybe even up to 13 million. There's a lot of things hitting us at once, including this housing authority issue, the $7 million in lost property tax revenue alone. We already had a $7 million announced shortfall, and then now we have 7 more million. The state continues to advance legislation that restricts even more property tax revenue. So it's without any question, we're gonna have to reduce spending, but what I told this department and the city council is we're not gonna reduce anything in animal care. So we have 29 different departments, and probably not that many in the general fund, but all the general fund departments are being asked right now to come up with reduction proposals, so we can see what do we have to stop doing to be able to afford to do what we want, what the council and the committee wants to do. But for this department, no reductions. So they had already begun working on some, but we said, you know what, it doesn't make sense. So the budget will be not only level, but it will grow a little bit with this one-time money. And maybe even some more. I told the team yesterday, we may have to look at maybe even adding a little bit more in next year's budget to continue the trajectory of making these improvements in the plan. So I'm gonna be here more often. I think you all, this advisory board is important. I think it's been consistent with animal care operations overall, where we haven't elevated you in your opinion enough. But you all should be the primary representatives for thought process in this operation. Just like our Parks and Recreation Advisory Board, just like our Library Board. We don't have any other groups out there, to take library as an example, that are advising staff and council. It's the Library Board, all right? And so we want to hear from this city council appointed team, if you will, to give us guidance and advice. You represent the community where you come from. You're the conduit to listening to people. And then part of these meetings is for city staff and us to get those ideas from the community in an advisory capacity. So I just want to let you know that. That's why I'm coming. I'm not coming just to say, hey, the city manager's here. I'm coming because I want to challenge you all to give us advice as you hear from the community. You're going to be the top primary people we get advice from. You're appointed by city council. It's in our, city council procedures that there's an animal care advisory board. And it's not just to have meetings, it's so we can hear from you. And you all represent the community. So those are my comments for today. I'm glad I was here in this meeting, and I'll be coming to just about everyone I can make, because it'll be a priority for me. So if I do miss, it's something extraordinary going on, I can't make it. But
We have devoted committee members.
that's great, I can tell. Yeah, I spoke with many of you already at city council. You were there for those presentations we had, so.
I focus on, I caught the female at San Juan. I catch females at San Juan neighborhood because it's poverty.
Yeah.
And he catches all kinds of.
Well, I foster all the way down to Brownsville sometimes.
Yeah, wow.
I don't want anybody coming after me for being beyond my number.
Well, I appreciate you all. Yeah, thank you for what you do. I know you volunteer.